So this video is going to be a walkthrough of how to install MESA as a Windows user. And the first thing that you want to do, since MESA is not really supported on Windows, is you will want to get a Windows Subsystem for Linux. And the ways that you can do that is you can go to the Microsoft Store and you can either type WSL or Ubuntu, which is one of the simplest Linux distributions. So if you search for Ubuntu, you will see all of these. You can use any of these. If you use one of these three, there will be an extra step at the end, but I'll walk you through it. You can just use this one and save yourself the trouble. So to install it, you just select it and then click here on install. It will prompt you to select a username and a password, which will be the name of your user and the name of your folder on the Linux subsystem. And the password will be your root password. So you will use it when we use the sudo command. So after you have installed it, you will have a prompt just like this or a little like this. And you can see that if you type ls, which is the command to show what is on your current directory, yours will be empty. I have a lot of things here, but yours will be empty as it is a fresh installation. If you can try going up one directory by using this command. This is change directory, and 2 dots means the directory above the one you are now. So if you do this and press enter, if you execute the command, you will see that we are now in the home directory. And if you check the contents of the home directory, you only have my user. So if we change back into this user, we'll be exactly where we were before. And also this folder with your username is usually called your home, and you can access it just by typing cd and a space, and it takes you back to your home. Or you can do cd and a tilde. The tilde is a shortcut for your home. That is when we're in the home, you will see the little tilde here. This is very useful for paths. If you just want to install everything into your home, then the path, the absolute path, is just a tilde, which simplifies matters. So we're going to begin by installing the prerequisites to the MESA SDK. If you follow, like, all of this is explained here. The part that I just did is explained here in this note for Windows users. You can also use the PowerShell, the Windows PowerShell. You can run as an administrator, and you can just type this into it. That will also work. But I recommend getting it from the Windows Store, as this will sometimes tell you that this command is incomplete. It depends on the Windows version you have. So now that we have our Windows Subsystem for Linux installed, we need to get our prerequisites for the MESA SDK, as I was saying. If you go to the MESA documentation page, we're going to allow it to open. And if you go to installing MESA, you will see that the first step here is to install the MESA SDK. So the MESA SDK is a bunch of tools that are necessary for MESA. And obviously, in order to install those tools also have prerequisites, so we're going to have to install those. So we're going to go here to the MESA SDK website, which is kept by Rich Townsend, which is also a MESA developer and one of the developers of Gyre. And be sure that you are using that you are downloading the SDK for your correct system. So this is a Linux operating system with an Intel or AMD processor, which will be likely all of you. We also have an Ubuntu distribution, so we're going to look at the prerequisites on this column here, and in order to install them, we're going to use apt, which is a software management package. And before we can start using apt to like very easily install all of these things, we want to make sure that it is up to date. So we're going to go do sudo apt update. And since I'm using the sudo command, it asks me for my password. And now I need to run this to see what can be upgraded. So it looks like there's a few things that can be upgraded. So we're going to do sudo apt get update. And it's done. So as soon as you get this done message, that means that your apt get is now up to date, and we can start using it to install all of the MESA SDK prerequisites. So the first is bin utils. So we just do sudo apt get install bin utils. And it's telling me that it's done nothing because my bin utils is up to date. So all that you need to do is just repeat the same command for all the names in the column Ubuntu. So now we're going to do it for make. Again, it's not been upgraded as mine is up to date, but yours will probably ask you for a prompt to install new updates. One thing that might be useful to you if you're not used to working in the terminal, Linux terminal, is that if you press the up arrow while in your prompt, it will start scrolling through the previous commands that you've executed. Another thing that might be useful to you is that in Linux, there is no copy paste as Control-C, Control-V, but if you highlight something, it gets automatically copied into your transfer area, and you can just paste it with a right click, a right mouse click. So Perl is also up to date, so we're just going to move on to the other things. Next up is libx, also up to date, and the dev version of libx 11. There are some dependencies here that have two things in the same column. You'll have to get both of them. And mine are all up to date, but I'm gonna do it anyway, so you can pause the video and just do it along with me if you feel like it. So these are also up to date. And finally, the TCSH. Also up to date. So when you're done writing these apt get install for all of these things, that means that you have all the MESA SDK prerequisites, and you can finally get the MESA SDK. And you can do that just by clicking this link. This is the most current version of the SDK, which is good to use with the latest MESA release, which is 23.05.1. So when you download something from your browser in Windows, it gets sent into your downloads folder. Let me get that over here really quick. So you can see that it's been downloaded, the MESA SDK, the latest version, has been downloaded into the downloads folder. But The thing with your subsystem, your Linux subsystem, is that it doesn't really work like you would expect a normal Windows folder to work. You can still look at it. Okay, so I'll have to refresh this link, but you can still look at it from the tree file, the file explorer in Windows, and you can open it and look at the things that you have inside. But if you try to drag something into the folder or to drag something out of the folder, it will not work properly. So if you want to put things in your Linux folder or take them out, you need to do it via the terminal. And if you are in your Linux subsystem, the way that you access your Windows system files, including your downloads folder, is a little bit contrived. So you can't just change into Windows directories from your Linux subsystem. You have to go through the I think it's a symbolic link. It's what it's called. The main idea is that there is a folder here called MNT, which is where your Windows system lives in your Linux subsystem. So, and in order to get to that folder, you need to go up 2 levels from your home. So we're going to change directory to the directory above. I use the 2 dots. Then I do it again. And now if you do ls in this directory, you can see the mnt directory here. So we're going to go ahead and change into that. And then inside this directory, you have 3 things. This is your Windows subsystem for Linux, which you don't want to touch. And then the other things, usually they will be single letters starting with C, single characters starting with C. These will be your hard drives. If you have only one, then usually it will be C. So if you change into your C hard drive, you will see that you have a lot of Windows related things here. The one that you want to get is this users, and we're going to change into that. And then in your users, you'll usually want to check and see what is your what user you are using when you use Windows. It will usually be your name, assuming it's your computer and nobody else uses it. So in my case, it's Diogo. So we're just going to go ahead and change into that. And then inside Diogo, like there's a bunch of things, but most importantly, you have the downloads folder. So if we change into the downloads folder, we can now see all of these files that were in the downloads folder. So if you check the downloads folder, the things that are here are exactly the same things that are here. And importantly, our MESA SDK, the tarball, the zipped version, compressed version, is here. So in order to copy this into the place where we want it to be, usually it will be your home or a specific folder that you create to hold your software in your home. You can just do cp. This is the command to copy a file, and you will have to tell what file you are copying, either by using an absolute or relative path. In this case, since we are in the downloads folder, I can just use the name of the file. And then you need to tell it where the file is supposed to go. Where are you copying it into? And this will be your home. That's why I just use this tilde. And if I execute this command and then change into my home, you will see that now the MESA SDK tarball is here and ready to be unpacked. So in order to unpack it, you have the instructions here. And so you feel free to just copy the instruction. Well, okay, it didn't copy correctly. Let me go ahead and redo that. This is essentially, this is the command to unzip or untar tar files. This is a bunch of options. And here you need to put the name of the file we want to untar, which is the MESA SDK. And then over here, we put the place where we want the untarred file to go. So we execute this. You can see all the files that are inside the MESA SDK being expanded into your current directory. And now, lo and behold, we have the MESA SDK here. Now, to complete the MESA SDK, you need to do two things. You need to set an environment variable that tells your system where the SDK is so that you can use MESA anywhere on your computer. And the other thing that you need to do is you need to activate the MESA SDK. These are things that you do not want to do every time that you open your terminal. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it so that whenever you open your terminal window, these things get done automatically for you. And you can do that by adding the commands that you want to be executed to one of two files. These files can be your .bashrc file. You can open it with the nano command, where nano is a stream editor that you see here. It's a little primitive, but it's the best that you have while in the subsystem, so get used to it. And what we want to do here is we want to export the MESA SDK root variable. And we want to set it to be exactly equal to the path of the MESA SDK. There was an error in the version of the guide that I gave you where it was just like this, but you need to be inside the MESA SDK for it to work. So you need to specify the root directory of the SDK here like this. And what this does is it sets this variable, MESA SDK, to be the path of the SDK where it is installed. And then we also want to activate the MESA SDK, which we can do by adding this command. So source is a command that orders your system to refresh a file, close it, and reread it and re-execute it. And so what this does is a command that goes into the SDK and then starts this this script which initializes the SDK. And if we want to put them both here in the bashrc file. To exit, you can just do Control X. It will prompt you to save. You say yes, and you say that you want to save it with the same name. And so now we have these things on our bashrc file, but the bashrc file will not be refreshed unless you source it. So we execute this command. We only need to do it once, and hopefully you get some messages like this. Now, importantly, you may get a bug that says something like unsupported architecture, something like this. If you get this error, it means that you are using an old version of the Windows Subsystem for Linux. And what you need to do is you need to open the Windows PowerShell in administrator mode. So you just type PowerShell and you run it as administrator, and it opens something like this. And then you want to execute this command, except here, where you have Ubuntu 20.04, you want to make sure that you have the version of Ubuntu that is installed in your computer. So if you remember when we were in the store, we saw that there were various versions of Ubuntu that you could get. So if you have these or this or this, you need to specify, if you have this one, you need to specify the 18.04.6. This one, you need to specify the 2004. This one, you need to specify 2204. If you have this one, in principle, you will not have to do anything. After you execute this command, it will take a while, and for me, it took me about 1 hour and a half. But if your directory is mostly empty, it should be quicker. But hopefully you will get these 3 messages. This tells you that the MESA SDK has been correctly installed and activated, and you don't need to worry about anything else. Now that the SDK is installed, we can finally get MESA. And in order to get MESA, we can do it from the Zenodo repository. And there's a button here, you just click download and it starts the download. I will not do it now because it's 2 gigs and it'll take a long time. But after it goes into your downloads folder, you need to change back into your downloads folder. So you need to input the whole path again, and then you need to do cp MESA r23.05.1. I think it's what the file is called, but if you just do MESA and then tab, it will autocomplete for you the name of the file. If you press tab a few times, if it doesn't work the first time, if you press tab a few times, it will show you the files that match the name that you wrote. So your MESA SDK version will probably also be in your downloads folder. So if you do just MESA tab, it will not autocomplete to the MESA file that you just downloaded, the zipped version of MESA. But if you do like MESA or MESA, sorry, MESA-R, it will autocomplete to the one that you want. And then don't forget to send it to your home with just tilde. So once you have MESA in your home, you will need to unzip it. It's really easy to unzip MESA. It's easier than to unzip than to untar. You just need to use the unzip command, and it will extract all of the files and inflate the zip. And once this is done, you will have the full MESA files that you need to run your stellar models in your computer with full privileges, which is exactly what you want. So you can see that I have this folder here, which is MESA. This is the MESA file tree, all of them. And before we can do the final step, which is to install MESA, we will need to set some more environment variables and some variables that are of interest to MESA. And so we're not going to use source, we're going to use nano. We're going to go back to our .bash rc file. And we're going to add the things that they tell us to add here in this box. So the first thing is we will need to export this MESA-dir variable, just like we did with the MESA SDK root. So we want none of this. We want our home, and we want MESA r23.05.1. Then we will need to set the number of threads that we want MESA to use when it is using the OpenMP, which is a parallelization thing. So to run stellar models takes a very long time, and it takes a large amount of resources. The more threads that you assign to MESA, the faster your models will run. Usually, if you are running MESA on your computer, I don't recommend that you are running anything else that is very intensive, like video editing or playing playing a recent video game or something like that, I really recommend that when you are running a model on Mesa, you just have the model running, and it's the only, intensive thing that is happening in your computer at the time. For the number of threads that you should use, I always recommend 2 times the number of cores in your computer minus 2. This makes sure that you are using Mesa to its fullest potential. There are some diminishing returns, so using 40 cores is not going to be twice as effective as using 20 cores, but you want to go for the most that you can spare, and that is usually all of them except for 2. Most computers will have 4 cores or 8 cores, though some newer ones may have 16 cores. I don't recommend you do more than 22 threads, but if you have 4 cores, then you can do 6. If you have 8 cores, you can do 14. I'm going to leave mine at 14. Again, I'm going to exit with Control X. I'm going to save the file and exit. Now I'm going to source the file again to make sure that everything is working correctly. I'm also going to make sure that the MesaDeer variable is correctly defined. And you can see that when I ask the terminal to print the value of MesaDeer, to print the value of a variable, you use this $sign. It prints the correct path to Mesa. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change into the MesaDeer, and we're going to install Mesa by typing this command. And this may take a while to install Mesa, simply because Mesa isn't just building and compiling its code, it's also testing a lot of use cases, of test cases, to make sure that all of the things are working as they're supposed to. You may get an error when you are installing Mesa saying that the installation of something called ADI PLS has not been successful. That is fine. You don't need ADI PLS for anything. We will be using it. It's a software to calculate the adiabatic oscillations. We will be using Gyre, not that, so that is fine. Just make sure that you don't accidentally stop the installation while it's going. If you have a cursor blinking, but you don't have that prompt, but if you don't have like the prompt that you can usually see, I'm trying to find it, like in my computer, it's green text. Yeah, so this, if you're not getting this, you don't want to stop the installation. It's going on. It's just that a few things take a really long time. After your Mesa installation is done, you will be ready to use it. And you can follow the instructions that I have here on the guide that I gave you to start making your own models. Okay, we don't need this anymore. It's taking a while, and you can see that my computer's getting a little slow. But after you've completed this part, you can skip to section 2.3, which is building a sun, which tells you essentially how what you need to do in order to get started on your project. And essentially what you will be doing in order is the thing that I showed you in class, where you will be copying a work directory from here. So this is where your work directory lives. This command copies this folder, this -r tells the system that you want to copy this folder and everything inside it, and want to place it on your home. You can place it anywhere. If your Mesa variables are well set, then it does not matter where you put your work folders. But if you change the place where your Mesa folder is, like the Mesa files are, or the Mesa SDK, you will have to change your bash RC file to reflect the new location. So I hope this was useful for you. I was sort of waiting for the installation to finish, but yeah, it takes a little while, especially the equation of state data and the opacity data. Try to follow the instructions that I've written here for you in this guide. And if you have questions, you also have my email here in the first page. And I hope this was useful to you.